Good afternoon. This was quite an interesting thing for me. Um, I live in downtown Delaware and found that I have no space for a vegetable garden. So I began to vertically garden in my backyard. And the amount of harvests that I was able to get every summer, I just kept planting more and more. And it may be one or two or three plants um, of each crop that I wanted, but I found that the sky was the limit. And so that's what made me begin to research this, because believe it or not, this is an up and coming subject. And we'll get into all of that. And hopefully, at the end of this, you will understand that it's not just about trellises and turtles. Wouldn't you want to enjoy this? Just think about it. The vertical garden in a Boston courtyard. That's vertical gardening. It can be flowers, it can be plants, it can be vegetables. Anything that grows up is considered vertical gardening. This is my own backyard. I have used my fence, my garage wall. I've used numbers of trellises, uh, you name it. I think I've got things in pots that are growing up. I use any structure that I possibly can to vertically garden, and it is worked well for me. Vertical gardens are not new. There is archaeological evidence of ancient vertical gardens. For example, look at the ancient clay pot that I found at my mother's house when I was cleaning it out. The examples of this are the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the gardens at the Summer Palace in Beijing, China. Mayans, Aztecs, Incas, all terraced gardens to grow food and medicine up steep mountainsides. That's considered vertical gardening. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Dr. Stephanie Daly, who is an Assyrianologist, um, is an archaeologist, but she really likes to find different sorts of inventions. Now, the Hanging Gardens were believed to be in Babylon in 6 BC. And if we all think back, it was attributed to Nebuchadnezzar. And the story goes that his bride came from Mesopotamia, which was very lush, and she missed greenery in the desert. So he built the gardens as a place for her to go and relax and not be so homesick. But in truth, the gardens are, there's been no uh, clue of a garden in Babylon, and they have done diggings extensively and found nothing. However, the king Sennacherib, who was in 7 BC in Nineveh, which was after a war was referred to as New Babylon, um, did have hanging gardens. And the cool thing was that he had structures that allowed for terraces. And he also had what was known in generations after as the Archimedes screw, which he turned to allow water to come in. So he had irrigation from the desert, and all he did was turn a screw. And he had all of his gardens had the ability to have fresh water, and it was flowing. Now, why would somebody want to put a garden in the desert? Well, as we're going to find out, there are very real reasons why there are many gardens going up in the desert today. The Summer Palace in Beijing, China. Slightly different reason, not so much for the lush greenery, but because of the Chinese philosophies, the king made the garden for his mother. And it was the 12 virtues. So every garden represented the yin and the yang of some virtue. And they were more for meditation and to be visually beautiful. So while the design is different, it's very sort of simple. They use the gardens as art. You could change the flowers out seasonally if you wished. People would go, there was running water in just about all of the gardens. And this actually sits on this beautiful lake. The only problem was that the gardens burned in the 1800s. And so in the early 90s, they were restored in the 1890s to the best of their ability, but they had to go back and look at paintings from the early gardens. And so some of the plants were no longer, they were extinct. So they had to do their best to find replacements that closely mimicked what they could not get. The Mayans, the Aztecs, and the Incas. Well, the Mayans were the first civilization here that terrace farmed. And those terraces were cut by hand. And they didn't waste anything. Because the mountains are always misty, it was a water source. So what they did was they chiseled into the sides of these mountains, and then they covered them with moss and grasses that would help to hold the moisture in. And they built retaining walls from these stones was what was chiseled out. So they built them up to hold back erosion. And then they would plant along the steps. So this went on, and these civilizations all did this. And there were other civilizations throughout Mesoamerica and into South America that also did this. And they don't know how it all happened, but so many civilizations actually farmed this way. And this created the food source that they needed for their villages and for their medicines. So they grew their herbs and everything this way. And because this is Machu Picchu, and because it's in the Andes, there's always a mist that's available, and that is the water source. So they didn't have to worry so much about irrigation. So just those walls that they built actually help to retain moisture, and in dry periods, the water leaches out of those stones and is used by the crops. Now we get to the 20th century. And there was a man by the name of Stanley Hart White. And Stanley was a landscape architect. He studied at Harvard, and he started working at the University of Illinois. And he patented what's referred to today as botanical bricks. Now, what you see is the original patent, which has long since run out, and it's now in public domain, but it's very interesting to look at because you see how he was thinking and how he put these bricks together. And what did he do with these bricks? Well, he used them to make exterior walls. So if somebody was putting a pool in their yard, that pool could be totally surrounded by botanical bricks. And the nice thing about it was, all you had to do was just replace the plant. If the plants died, you could just replace the plant. And so he built this quite an ingenious system of botanical bricks. And many places still have these bricks. There is a professor from Dr. Richard Hindle from Louisiana State University who decided he was going to see if this was really all it was cracked up to be. And so the University of Louisiana, Louisiana State University, does have some of his walls on campus. They found that with just a little bit of modification using newer materials, the concept is the same, use the same sort of drawings, and he managed to create these beautiful outdoor botanical brick walls. Patrick Blanc. Patrick Blanc is a botanist. He's also a contemporary landscape designer, and we are going to look at some of his things. And I'm going to explain why these are so important. He's using green walls for more than beauty, and they are beautiful. He is known globally and is working with international cities all over the world, hundreds of projects he consults on to build vertical green projects for their needs. His work began in France in 1986. His first big work that was recognized was by the School of Industrial Sciences in Paris. It is still there. It is quite large. And there are museums now in Paris that have these walls, and they surround courtyards. They have them in all sorts of places. They are inside buildings with these huge echoing atriums, and it's been found that these walls actually reduce the echo and muffle the sound. So since 1986, he has patents galore, and he's consulting or designing so many projects. There are now companies, one of which is in the United States, which is doing the same sort of work globally. And we'll look at something that they're doing as well. But that's Patrick Blanc. He's kind of a crazy guy. He's got green hair. He kind of looks kind of crazy, but he is. He's all about this, and he loves doing this. And he's got his own website. So if you want to Google Patrick Blanc, you can see some of the work that he's done and is currently doing. This was one. One Central Park, Sydney, Australia. Sydney was having a big problem because with global warming, Australia, is there's a lot of desert in the outback. And some of these cities need a way to manage microclimates. So they came up with this. This is a series of buildings. There are 350 species of plants, 250 of which are native plants. All of the buildings have heliostats. This is a heliostat. And they arrange the buildings so that there is a courtyard in the middle. So it provides a lot of shade if you want to sit in the courtyard below your building. But it also prevents the sun from getting into the inside plants. So they devised a heliostat system, which moves according to where the sun is. And every building has heliostats, which are a grouping of mirrors that literally target where the sunlight needs to go. And they bounce off all the mirrors on all the buildings so that sunlight is present on those walls that are not exposed. Now, why would they do that? Well, there's a park here. There's a huge park here that is surrounded by these giant green walls. And they have found that just the smell of the greenery in a city which is, polluted and hot and, maybe not the best for people's mental health, people sitting next to a green wall, they have found that their physical health improves. It's also been found that they create their own microclimate because of leaf transpiration in the plants. It cools the area. And when there are large groupings of plants, really large groupings of plants, it can actually help to change the weather a little bit. So all of this is really important. In dry areas, those plants are adding humidity and making that environment so much better for the people that live there. So this is One Central Park, Sydney. It is done. They are doing this in museums, in all of the parks. People utilize these parks, and they said that they have found that mental health for many of the people that live in the city has greatly improved. Bless you.
Did it mention how they water those plants?
I'm going to get into that.
That's a big high building.
Here is Bosco Verticali. This is in Milan. Bori Studios. I'm sorry.
You know what Bosco Verticali
Yes,
is?
it means vertical forest. It was finished in 2014, and they are currently building other ones. The Italian government wanted people to be more in touch with nature, and because Milan is a huge metropolitan city, this was one way for people to be in touch with nature. So they built these buildings, and it's quite interesting how they did it. In these girders, these steel girders, they built terraces that would support incredible amounts of weight by literally welding girders into those girders to support these balconies. What they did was they took 800 trees and they planted in these two buildings. There's 800 trees. They are either dwarf or semi-dwarf trees. They put them in these metal frames. They were like tubs. They put them in metal frames. They put in irrigation systems, which are pumped from the basement and go up all these stories. And then they planted native plants, perennials. They planted 15,000 perennials. They planted 5,000 shrubs in these two buildings. And they took 3,000 square meters of building surface and turned it into a yield of 30,000 meters of woodland greenery. So what does this mean? This is a habitat. Birds, insects, pollinators, even small mammals are on the bottom floors. A squirrel comes up, there a squirrel is. People are able in the city to see nature at work. And they all sign that they will help to take care of these as best they can. And then they have gardeners that come in that do the rest. Okay, now this leads me to the next part. Why are these two buildings so important? Well, they're promoting biodiversity. We know that. Different microclimates. The microclimates are different due to the number of plants. There is a big impact on the environment in these areas because of urban heat islands, and we're going to talk about that shortly. There's lower levels of acoustic pollution. So car horns when you're in your apartment, car horns and you know, all sorts of nonsense going on outside is dulled a lot. Not only that, the apartments are actually more energy efficient because the plants buffer them from the outside weather. The air is cleaner, there's lower CO2 levels, higher O2 levels, and lower levels of small particulate pollution. We talked about less heat transfer because of plant transpiration and insulation. They have found that areas that do this have less storm water flooding. The plants soak up the water. It never makes it to the ground. If it was a building that was a hard surface building, it would be running down the building and gushing, and the storm drains may not be able to handle it. But they're finding that stormwater management has become a much easier thing for them because of all of these plants. Once established, the costs are pretty minimal. I mean, you have to replace a tree here, or you may have to replace a plant or a bush or something, but it's minimal. But how do we know? How do they replace? If you bear with me, I'll let you know. This is my backyard. Don't, you know, this is my backyard. The vertical garden, you know, that's cucumbers on one side. There's watermelon growing up amongst my my climbing roses. And then there's gem wisteria. But let's take a look. Rid of this. Rid of this. Okay. There we go. There's a job for you.
Auto Delaware is your source for electric and hybrid electric vehicles. With high gas prices, more and more people are saving money. Switching to electric vehicles and fuel-efficient hybrid electric cars and SUVs. Auto Delaware, which includes Delaware Cadillac, Delaware Subaru, and Kia of Wilmington, is now taking orders on new electric vehicles like Cadillac Lyriq, Subaru Solterra, Kia EV6, and Throw. Want an electric car now? Auto Delaware has a great selection of pre-owned electric and hybrid.
Sorry. What's job? Okay. Out of this. Okay, I briefly mentioned what an urban heat island is. Urban areas are all hard surfaces, and many of them are dark. Many of them are glass. We have a lot of stone um, and dark rooftops. Uh, these all serve to intensify the sun's rays, which raises the temperature in the cities. So studies have been done in big cities and it's shown significant lowering of summer temperatures uh, in areas where there are green walls and parks. Microparticle levels, the air pollution definitely falls. Higher levels of oxygen surround the buildings, and due to the transpiration of plants on a grand scale, there's more evaporative cooling. And so this has been found. This is from NASA. They have actually done they've done heat studies from space, and they've come up with this, that cities can be actually 4 degrees Celsius or 7 degrees Fahrenheit higher in the city than on the surrounding rural areas. So this tells us that less hard surfaces, more greenery, soil, all of that lends to creating a better climate for us. So what ways are vertical gardening impacting the world? Well, Mumbai, Dubai, Shanghai, these are all places where there is a lot of vertical gardening taking place. They use produce from their vertical farms to feed their people. And it's not just on a little, tiny little, oh, here, 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 and here. These are huge facilities that they have built, especially Mumbai is building more and more. Dubai has taken old airplane hangars at their airports and created vertical farming. And they have vertical farming like this. This is kind of what the vertical farming does. They are taking place in abandoned buildings. They're utilizing what they have. The thing with Dubai was they had no farming. It's in the desert. So they ended up having to ship in all of their produce. And that produce costs a lot of money. So they decided to try to thwart that and grow their own. And so far it's working. Increasing populations encroach on rural areas. That's happening in Mumbai and Shanghai. Places in the deserts, no farmlands. Farmland may be unusable due to toxins and heavy metals. That's happening in China.
3:02 p.m. Well,
Anyway.
doing it in Iceland very heavily.
I'm sorry?
In Iceland,
Yes,
very
because
heavily.
of their cold weather, yes.
We were there, we saw it, it was amazing.
So this is Sunzhou Urban Agricultural District. This is being built as we speak. It is in Shanghai, China. The population in Shanghai is 24 million people. China has lost 47,000 square miles of farmland because it is either heavy metals, too much population. Some of it, 1/6 of all the farmland is heavily polluted. So when you just keep having increasing populations and dwindling farmland, you're in a bad spot. China actually was asking their own citizens to put gardens in their backyards and then they would buy their produce. But they found that it was a problem because there was no way to regulate it. And most of the diet in China is greens. So greens are relatively inexpensive. So they've decided to build the Sasaki Corporation has designed an urban center, which is 200 acres of vertical farms interspersed with multi-use areas. So this actually becomes a green area of multiple uses. They have hydroponic pools where they grow lettuces and they grow seaweed and all of the greens that the typical Chinese diet incorporates, bok choy and all of that. The Sasaki Corporation, it is amazing the width and the breadth of this huge undertaking. And they are an American company.
Sasaki. Really?
They do have one of their headquarters is in Japan, but their other headquarters is here. And this website will show you how big it is. I'm not going to go into it now, but it is a huge thing. And they built pumping units and hydroponic units and all of this, but they also put playgrounds in there and they put family picnic areas in these buildings and out of these buildings. And they have entertainment and hotels, and they're putting it all in because they want the next generation to understand about agriculture in vertical farming. Let's switch gears a little bit. Interior green walls serve as room dividers, humidify your living space, improve inside air quality, boost morale and give a sense of well-being, can provide fresh produce and herbs during winter months. It can deaden the sound of your apartment neighbors and can provide people who don't have pets with something to nurture. Sometimes the elderly are shut in and they have no one to care for. And so if they have a green wall, they have something to care for, something to nurture. And you can create wall art with textures and colors. You can use these as, young kids moving into New York apartments need extra room. So you can use these as room dividers and walls and all of those things. So it's a really interesting concept. There is a green wall installation that just went on inside one of the cafeterias, I believe in the well-being building. Let's see if I can. This is how it was created. Now you'll notice that they're in frames. And these frames have cubes in them.
Thing about the light requirements for that wall and how they provide the light requirements.
Light requirements.
Yeah, so you need sun to grow plants.
Or growing lamps.
Yeah. Is it?
I think
is
they
that
use growing lamps. Yes.
Is that the Star Campus? Is that what
Yes.
that was? So I actually visited there because Dell State is also gonna get a very much smaller living wall in their new ag building, and they have special lights. So all the plants they choose have very similar light requirements. There is some window lights that come on the the left side, but everything else is supplemented with, artificial light.
I noticed there was a lot of ferns and begonia and that kind of stuff lower that, don't need full sun, but that's a big wall.
It is a big wall, and they can change the plants out. So it can act as art. If they want to put more color into it, they can do that. It's like living art. And they found that it's in the wellness center. So people are walking through and they're smelling it and they're feeling it. And it's quite interesting, actually. Now, the benefits of growing up. We're going to start to get into the gardening aspect of growing up. This is actually an agro farm. And as you can see, they have structures where they use their growing medium. And then they put their lettuce in, and lettuce is a great one to grow up. You don't get the sand and the dirt and the pests that come in from underneath the ground. They're cleaner. It's less stressed, more disease free. The fruits have much more uniform shape because they're not lying on the ground. So those watermelons that you get that look perfectly beautiful on the top, you pick them up and they're flat on the bottom. You don't get that and you can grow melons vertically. You just have to know how to do it, and you have to have the right support for the melon. It's better air circulation. So when you're pruning, you're getting better air circulation through any of the crops that you grow vertically. And the better air circulation keeps the disease levels down, as we all learned. And for those of us who bending becomes an issue after a while, you're not bending so much. You're working closer to your eye level when you are growing vertically. And it's easier to maintain, especially when you're hand picking off pests. It's a lot easier to see than something that's growing out of the ground and is a big bush. When you're growing up, things tend to be more manicured and pruned, and therefore it's a lot easier to pick those pests right off. One of the first questions you should ask yourself is, where can I put this vertical garden? When you're placing your garden, consider the microclimates around your house. If you need something that needs shade, it should probably have more of a northern exposure or maybe an eastern exposure so that you're getting morning sun, but not the hot afternoon sun. And those plants should all be put together. If you're building a wall, which I will talk to you about, the patterns and the duration of sunlight and the way the sun goes through your yard is extremely important. The amount of humidity, the daytime highs and lows are all important. Air circulation. Is there too much air? How can there be too much air? Well, if it's moving air, there can be too much air. And if there's not enough, if you put a vertical garden in up against a structure, make sure that it is open within so that you have the ability to check for mildews and scales and things that like a lot of moisture. Pot color can be important. If you're putting in seedlings, don't use black. You will fry your little pumpkins and whatever. The availability of irrigation is extremely important. And sun-loving plants need southern exposure. That's the longest sun duration. Now, the usual types of support, we all know these. Trellises, pergolas, cattle fence, nylon netting, arches, columns, fences, gates, and walls, especially stone, because climbers like the unevenness and the roughness of stone. But now, this is for you, Susan. Other types of support. That's an old wrought iron chair, which is now in my backyard covered with clematis. Rebar. Don't throw away rebar. Save it. You can use it. And that can help you with putting in some of the plastic fencing or whatever you decide to use. Use old bicycles. I saw the coolest old bicycle. The trip down south, somebody had Mandevilla growing up a bicycle, and in the front of the bicycle, they had nasturtiums and all these beautiful things that, were in the basket. And it can be an old bicycle. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular. You can use old rain gutters. And if you have old rain gutters, don't throw them away. You can build a wall using rain gutters, and they work really beautifully for holding on to the pots of your plants. Ladders, old orchard ladders or old regular ladders. You can hang pots. You can nail window boxes to them. You can do a lot of different things. Pallets, you get pallets, you can use those. And old garden tool handles, never throw them away. You can make teepees out of them for cucumbers or squash or anything. And if you're cleaning up your yard after a storm, hang on to some of those sticks. If they're not diseased, you can use those sticks to build little teepees to help support some of your climbers. Now, there are so many different things you can use. There are many things that you can use that we have. An old shoe organizer can be used, and it's really great if it's mesh. The only thing you need to do is make sure that you have something to block the mesh that's porous. So you can use gardening felt. Make a little pocket. Put your medium in there, and you've got yourself a little wall, a little vertical garden. Now this one, the pockets are big. Just make sure that you don't use heavy, like humus or potting soil is best. And I always use coconut coir mixed in to make it even lighter, but it holds the moisture. And then I use this. And this can be purchased from any horticultural place or even Amazon has it. So you can use this. This is usually good for one season. It's not the sturdiest, but it works, especially if you're doing seedlings in the beginning before you plant everything in your garden. Now this one is meant to last. And this one is much heavier, and it is made of this garden felt. So it holds in the moisture, and it's heavy duty, and you can hang it. And the nice thing I love about this is that you can move it. If it starts to get scorched, if you've got scorch hitting your leaves, you can move this out of the direct sun and hang it in the shade. As long as your plants have the duration of sunlight that they need. And you can even put it in dappled sunlight. They still get sun, but they're not getting that full force. So you can do these, and these last longer.
Where did you buy that?
I got this off of Amazon.
Well, what is the name of it?
It's like a vertical, I used a vertical pocket system. I Googled it, and then you can see, you can pass it around if you want.
Yeah, okay.
And the felt that it's made from is this heavy. It's very heavy. Some people use natural lamb's wool that's still got that lanolin in it. A lot of roots will go into that, and they're very happy. So you put your soil in, and you line the bottom with lamb's wool, and it does hold on to moisture. This system I'm putting on my garage as we speak. These clip together. They come separately, and you clip them together, and you hang them, and they're sturdy. What are you hanging them with? Screws.
Into your siding?
And my garage is wood, and so I have a piece of plywood. So I screw the plywood in, and then I screw each one into the plywood. Yeah. Some people also use natural sponge. You can use that. You can water and use natural sponge.
Well, I see some of these devices are black in color.
Yes.
You had earlier spoken of black as absorbing a lot of heat. Do you have a mitigation suggestion for that?
Sometimes I spray paint them.
Ooh.
Yeah, I spray paint them a lighter color on the outside. On the inside, it's not as important. Then there's the system, which can be used hydroponically, or you can put soil in it. And I like it because this comes with wheels. So you can move it around your yard. Can't find the right spot, you can move it around.
What do you have to put in that to use it hydroponically?
There is a hole in the middle and you can do an irrigation system and then you have to just buy the hydroponic solution. Things to remember. Hydroponics is a very useful irrigation system for specific walls and vertical systems on the market. You can use a soaker hose. You can, which is another reason why I have a piece of plywood behind because I drilled holes in it and I have the soaker hose attached to the plywood. And then it hooks up to my hose, which is on a timer. And guess what? I don't have to time it. I don't have to do anything. If your wall is outside, make sure you group your plants together. A lot of people, the plants on the top tend to get scorched. So use succulents. They're pretty good. They do really well in vertical systems. If you have support the vines. Okay, here's something that's really important. If you are putting up vertical walls, make sure that your vines are trained for the wall. In a vertical wall, vines usually go on the sides so that they don't get, they're not the problem for the plants on the inside because they will overpower those plants on the inside. But if they're on the outside, they can cascade down and you can manage them a lot better. If you are growing up a trellis or a pergola, if you have a twiner, like native honeysuckle is a twiner, it wraps itself around your trellis. It's a seeker. It will find its own place to go. You can sort of coerce it into a spot, which is what I did. When I planted my coral honeysuckle, I put a little bridge trellis in from the base of that plant to my trellis and it climbed it and it's up there. Now that little trellis is part of the whole system. I can't undo it, but it's twined around that and it goes up. But if you plant peas or anything with a tendril like watermelons or any kind of melons, grapes, yes, grapes. You have to be very careful because they are sort of haphazard growers and they will grow in upon themselves and attach to themselves. And then what do you get? You get a ball of mess that produces nothing. So my suggestion is train them when they are very tender. Once they harden, once that wood hardens, you can't do anything. But when they're young and they're saplings or, very young vines, you can literally train them. And it's best to do that because then you're sure that they're growing in a manner where they're going to produce. Place shade-loving plants under taller plants for gardening. If you're working in a raised bed and you have something that's very tall, like corn, you can plant under corn. And you can also use the corn stalk for your vine. So
Native Americans did that.
yes, they did. Use plants with tall stalks as supports. Make TP trellises out of sticks. It's great for tendril growers. To lighten the weight of wall systems, use peat or coconut coir. Mix it with your compost or potting soil. If you don't have a soaker hose, go to Home Depot or wherever you go to get plumbing supplies and get yourself some PVC piping and just drill holes in it and then attach it. You can get the attachment and put it on your timed hose and you just mount it at the top and you can the systems actually can run this way. And then you've got a watering wall and you don't have to worry about it. Susan.
I was just gonna say it. So I did this with like one that's about the size of that board right there.
Uh-huh.
And I mounted it against, unfortunately, in full sun against side of our house. And I didn't think about that you have a really light colored house. And so the light that reflected off dried the plants. So I would not recommend doing that if you have really white or light colored
Right,
walls.
right.
But you can mount them on a, you can actually, I've seen them mounted on a wooden post or a metal post.
Yes.
And then you can attach it that way and it can be freestanding.
Wooden fences, a lot of people swear by wooden fences because as they weather, they're dark initially, but as they weather, they turn a gray, which actually doesn't really, it's neutral. It's kind of neutral. It doesn't really absorb and it doesn't really reflect. It just is a neutral. So thank you for mentioning that. If you're caging plants, like you've got tomatoes and you're caging them, plant companions around the bases of the cages. Plant your basil there. You know, plant your mozzarella there. Whatever.
Can't plant mozzarella.
I had a kid in middle school ask me, well, where do you plant the mozzarella? And I looked at him and I started to laugh and he was serious. I felt so bad. Okay, so if you're caging plants, the other thing you can do is if you have cherry tomatoes, you can get those up off the ground and hang them upside down in a bucket.
Yeah, but they don't do well.
I've done it. You know, sometimes
Mixed results.
yeah, it depends. And it also depends on where they're located too.
Not worth it.
But you can companion plant something on top of that, which was where I was going with that. All right, you want to plant trees in your vertical garden. And so in your vertical garden, there's the espalier method, which has been used for centuries in France, in French gardens. Space is limited. It takes up about a quarter of the space.
Pocket garden, pocket gardens in Annapolis. They
Yes.
have all of that.
Yes.
I think you have to get special trees too. Or
Usually
when
dwarf
you
trees.
order, like the apples or the peaches or whatever you're growing, and it has to say for espalier.
Sometimes if they're very young and they're the dwarf species, you can espalier them. Yes, and it's just a matter of you pruning what you don't want in the very beginning. But they have to be very tender because you've got to prune everything off, shape it, and then attach it to the structure somehow so that it trains that way. It makes life a lot easier, and the harvests, they say, are not bad. They're pretty decent, and you can see what you've got, and you can definitely get rid of your pests. It works well with small fruit trees, and it pairs with colonnades, which are columnar trees. They look like Q-tips. We've got them, which are cultivated to have tubular canopies. Tree maintenance is relatively easy once they're established. And there's different types of espalier method for different types of fruit. So the top, we have a diagram that's a training method typically done with a structure like a wall behind a tree. And you are helping them to grow sort of in a V pattern. They take up less room, but yet they're still manageable. The next one is against a structure, or it could be freestanding like in a vineyard. Some grapes do very well with double cordons. This is a triple cordon. These are cordons right here, which is what they're referred to as. You see the canes coming up this way. But the cordons are opposing arms. And on the bottom, you see what you see typically in vineyards. If you go to any vineyard, like, you know, any of the vineyards around here will have this bottom one. And that's, sorry. And that is, okay. And that is just supported by a wire, posts and wires between. The bottom It keeps the harvest close to the bottom and not out the top. They use second year growth for those. That can be other types of grapes or other types of fruit trees, like cherries do especially well on that middle one. Okay, and there are all sorts of trees that you can work with, but you need to make sure that it is a dwarf or a semi-dwarf cultivar. Columnar or colonnades, which columnars refer primarily to apple. Colonnades refer to any of the other fruits, like the stone fruits, the plums, the pears, the nectarines, or the plums, the peaches, the nectarines, and apricots. You also have colonnade cherry. There are other ones. There are some trees that they get kind of crazy and they have like two different types of fruit on sides, and they refer to those as, it's like called the fruit cocktail tree because you can get everything on it. But apples and pears are the most common. The width of the trees is 2 to 4 feet, and the heights usually top off around 10, between 10 and 15. And the trees can be grown in containers. And pruning and care is minimal, and the harvest is super easy because you're not climbing a tree. That's got all these branches all over. It's stuck to the middle. The fruit is primarily at the trunk. And that's what it looks like. This is Minnetonka orchards.
Viper had those in a couple of his places. But they tore them out. I don't know whether they didn't get enough, harvest or what happened, but they tore them out. They were only there maybe 4 years, 5 years.
Carlton Viper told me that they lost a lot of money on that.
They went,
Yeah.
They lost a lot of money on that.
oh, really?
They had to go back to traditional, which they have now.
Now, if you're getting apples, you have to have two because they need to cross pollinate. So, but this orchard said that their harvests have actually been better because they're better able to manage the pests. So the summary: vertical gardening is perfect for small spaces in urban areas. It allows small spaces to grow various crops, larger harvests. Allows biodiversity of insects and other animals and birds, cleans the air, insulates against sound, insulates against weather and temperature variance, manages stormwater, creates microclimates, aids in mental health, and serves to educate the next generation about the importance of greenery in an unbalanced environment, which is what we have. Any questions? Nancy?
I have a question from way back when, from those original walls in Paris.
Uh-huh.
You said that those bricks were made out of a bunch of like natural materials. What keeps that from disintegrating?
Well, that's the thing. The new bricks that have been made that they use in New Orleans, eventually that will erode. But they've used sturdier bricks now.
Okay.
That they just replace the plants and they fertilize. So the mediums can be changed and they're built in a way that they can remove a brick if they need to.
Yeah, but wouldn't all the bricks disintegrate? I'm just wondering whether
They screen, they use like a mesh that goes over the top. Yeah.
What is rust? Like you showed the chair, you would have something growing around it. How does rust affect your plant?
Well, somebody else asked me that question.